you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, yeah, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Welcome to another episode of Dad Is Not A Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things that I care about. And March is Colorectal Cancer Month. And again, as a person that feels like I am a person that wants to serve the public, I would be doing a disservice not to talk about this matter with colorectal cancer. I have an amazing couple of guests with me. I wouldn't call him a guest, he's my co-host. I have the one and other brother Tyrone Nero with me. He's a part of the Real Dads Network. Also, he leads the Real Dads Colorectal Cancer Outreach Program, and it's a program to get the message out to men of color about the importance of getting screened. And also, I have the returning champion. He is back with me again. We had a great conversation last year, and he shared his personal story of why it's important that men of color getting colon screened. He lost his father to colon cancer, and he is fighting to help the community when it comes to getting colon screened, but also give that importance of information and resource that his father didn't get when he was alive. And I'm here, and I'm honored to have him on. Dr. Crawford, thank you for coming on.
I appreciate you for inviting me for a second run. I think we had a great conversation last year. I hope that we were able to spread a lot of useful education, to your listeners. And I hope I can do the same, this year, of course. And, hopefully we can keep this going every single year. So March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And like you said before, one of the reasons why I got into this field was because, my dad didn't have all of the information that he needed. And unfortunately, he was taken away from me, too soon. And, with what impact that had on me and how it felt to lose a very good dad. And this is, the Dad Is Not A Noun podcast. I don't want anyone to feel the way I did as a result of losing their father. So anything I can do to help your listeners, your dads, your moms, your aunts, your sisters, in the community, I'm happy to help. And I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for coming on. And also, I want to let people know he is training the future of gastroenterologists where he's in New York. So he has, again, I go back to the Spider-Man analogy. When that comes with great power, it comes with great responsibility. And he's responsible of training the next future of people. That he's in that field right now. Again, the first question I ask all my guests, I'm going to ask my co-host, brother Tyrone, because I'm all about mental health. How's your heart?
I'm a social worker, so my heart is always bleeding and always wanting to help. So love is what we do as Black folks. So my heart is bleeding, and it's blue and it's red. So I'm good.
All right.
as long as it's pumping.
Dr. Crawford, you know that question. How's your heart at this moment?
Yeah, you caught me off guard, last year when you asked me that question, because normally, I'm so used to asking people how they're doing that I never, hear it back, in return, if you can imagine that. So, it was different. But, when it comes down to, the time that we're doing it and we're talking about, you know, what's going to be important and have the most impact, I can say, my heart is saying, let's do this, let's go, because it's extremely important. So I'm ready. I'm always ready.
And I love that. And I want to start with from Dr. Rachel Izaka, gastroenterologist, who highlight two critical facts: a 50% increase of colorectal cancer among those under 50 in the past 30 years. The prediction is by 2030, it will be the leading cancer death of this age group. And so I want to just throw it to you guys. What are your thoughts on those critical facts?
I could start.
Well, I'll take a stab. Can I take a stab at that, or do you
Okay.
want to go first, brother
Yes.
Yeah,
Tyrone?
yeah. Go ahead. Go
Yes.
for it, Dr. Comfort.
I think it's one of the glaring things in our community that we don't hear about. That it is unfortunate that the things that are putting our lives at risk and our younger generation is not broadcast everywhere to make us aware of what's happening and what they're up against. And there's so many risk factors for cancer, and every time you turn on the TV or pick up a paper, or if you browse the internet, you're not seeing the things that should really help us live and survive as human beings. And although we're talking about our community, it affects pretty much all communities. So it is a human problem that we're coming up against within the next coming years. And I do think that there are solutions that we could implement into our lives that can help decrease that rate, because an increase in 50% over the last couple of years is a reason for us to pause and say, well, what can we do better, and what are we doing wrong? And there's not enough that we're hearing coming from the government, or enough, I think, even from our medical institutions, to sort of maintain a healthy quality of life. And we still don't know, even in medicine, and despite all of the academic centers that are looking into this, we can see these numbers going up, but we haven't been able to really identify why that's happening. However, we do know that life today is very different than life decades ago, and you can only look at the two ways of living and start picking out the differences and analyze them and saying, well, should we go back to the way things were to a certain extent? And we can talk a little bit about some of those low-hanging fruits, if you will, as to what we can target and think about changing in our everyday lives that we sacrifice for convenience.
No, definitely. Tyrone, you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, well, I was going to take an approach as a social worker and an outreach worker. For the past year, I've been moving around in different spaces, with the task of having this shirt, Real Dads Get Screened,
Yep.
and then having a conversation on, how do you how do you approach a grown man and talk about how he defecates, or does he have problems with his backside, or let's just honestly have a conversation. So it starts out being an awkward conversation amongst men, but then once it becomes a grown-up conversation, like I had with a friend of mine yesterday. He told me he had some polyps, and every 5 years he has to get a colonoscopy. And that's the first. This is one of my best friends. He's 58. This is the first time he ever told me about it. He's known I've been doing this for about a year. So even though there's humility amongst men in conversations, then there's the what I can only hypothesize is there's the anxiety of, as I was speaking earlier, quality of life. Um, Quality of life is now you've been touched in a way that maybe we have had bravado with, or we've had, as men, we've had different or lack of conversation. So there might be just a cultural change that we would have to normalize before we could really get to the real issue of, yo, what is a full body checkup? That's just a
No,
hypothesis.
I agree. I agree. And it's one of the issues, that we run into, and it's from two sides. I think it's, there was this term called machismo, where, men would not speak about things like this, their medical problems, and they would just, go to the grave, with these problems. And then there was the other side, which is, the medical community, not reaching out and saying, what sorts of things should you be alarmed about? What should be, considered, what we call in medicine a red flag, or something that should make you concerned. Things like unexpected weight loss, blood in your stool, having a change in your bowel habits, not being able to go to the bathroom with ease, those sorts of things, no one, really hears about. It all starts with, the individuals, at least here in the United States, having some kind of healthcare, which is, sometimes difficult, because there's the uninsured, there's the underinsured. But if people have access to the healthcare system, that is literally the doorway for a lot of these questions to be sort of, spoken about. So the doctor should be saying and establishing some level of trust with their patient. Are you having any of these symptoms? And one should be able to say, yes, I'm having some of these symptoms. And it's up to us as the provider to say, well, in general, this is the standard of care. This is what we do in these particular situations. And these are what the tests would be. If you're having chest pain, sometimes we need to put some, stickers on your chest and see what your heart's doing. Sometimes we need to send you into a scanner just to make sure that your heart can continue to beat. If you're passing blood in your stool, there's an exam for us to make sure that there's nothing there that's dangerous, right? It's that kind of two-way conversation. I can give you the example that my father had blood in his stool, and he knew something was wrong because he never saw blood in his stool as an adult male. And he actually went to his provider, and his provider said, there's nothing that you need to worry about. It's your hemorrhoids, when he was wrong. And, it's one of those things where, you have to have, two sides of the coin working together. It can't just be one side. So yes, there's some individuals that don't want to talk about it. There's some, caretakers that aren't, forthcoming, or they could be judgmental, that we always have to think about in the back of our minds. But we have to be advocates for ourselves, sometimes. A talk like this, hopefully can empower individuals to say, there's something wrong with my health. There's something that is off. There's something that is a change in what I'm used to. Is it something that I need to worry about? Yes or no? I can tell you that over the last, 2 decades since I've been doing this, the medical community has become a lot sharper, at being able to advocate and reach out to patients. There's so many efforts to reach out into underserved communities just to make sure that, our population, at least here in New York, is taken care of. And I can admit that they are doing a tremendous job in being able to communicate with everyone from all walks of life to make sure that they have the kind of care that they get. So, I think the conversations like this are useful. I think one of the big pillars in the community, that we remember a couple of years ago, Chadwick Boseman, was almost like the main face of colorectal cancer in African American men. And, he showed that we were at risk, and it didn't matter, how strong we look. You could be the Black Panther, you could be a hero, you can be, rich, but, at the end of the day, you're still a human being, and there's certain things that can break, and you need to see someone to be able to help you, take your way through. Now, this goes back to, that cancer statistic that you mentioned. He was under the age, of 50. He was under the age where we typically would flag people. And sometimes, we haven't moved to that point where we know what's going on to be able to pick out every single person that could have something wrong. And he's just an unfortunate example, as to how we need to really be looking out for things that are out of the ordinary, and being able to discuss your health and not be ashamed or think there's an ick factor to it is extremely important. I talk to my patients all the time about what's going on with them. They'll tell me about things that probably don't need to hear about, but I'm okay with that because they don't know. I'm the professional, and I just need to hear the information. You just keep telling me, and then I'm going to use what I hear and figure out for you, based on my, once again, opinion, my background, is it something that we need to act on, and what's the appropriate way to act on it, and how quickly do we need to act on it? My goal as a healthcare provider is to not be a fortune teller. I am here to make sure that we can tell you what your risks are. I am here because I know what all of the available tests are that you would need, and how to triage these different tests. Does it need to be an invasive test? Does it need to be a blood test? I have the experience to tell you, what's the best order to do these things in order to reassure you that everything is okay, or to point you in the right direction where you can get this medical issue taken care of.
No, and I think one of the issues is, we live in a world where it's all about branding. Like, people don't get it until it's brand. So I'm gonna pose something to you guys. I think one of the things that's in the algorithm when it comes to men of color is self-care. So how do we apply that terminology, self-care, when it comes to colon cancer? Because I think that's important. When you talk about self-care, most of the guys talk about, like, getting their hair cut, their clothes. But when it comes to, like, health, how do we frame it in a ways that, getting your colon checked is a part of that self-care?
Should I do this one first? I have a thought process that's really funny. Not until you get into a relationship with a woman do you realize what they have to go through for a full body checkup, and they do it annually. And I'm not prescribing that for myself, but it was amazing to know that they have to go through some invasive instructions all their life just to make sure that things are okay. But us as men, we're like, I got it. We fall, we get nicks and cuts and bruises, and it's like we move on from it. But once our tail becomes vulnerable, everything else becomes vulnerable. And I don't know how to tell the person your tail, but that's what I'm black from slavery. We were always told to watch our tail. And I don't know how to do it in a way where we keep it jovial, but we also make it a part of the lexicon that it's more than just front. It's more than just your underarms and your teeth. It's everything.
Yeah, I think you bring something up in terms of, like, the branding, and how we can make this more tasteful, in a way, so that it's not this taboo. I think about a couple instances from just the general community. A long time ago, I would say maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, there was a TV anchor, Katie Couric, and she had her colonoscopy, on television. And that was very useful to the community that watched Katie Couric. And I think more recently, Will Smith had his colonoscopy that was filmed. And I think, a lot of the social impact comes from the people that we're used to seeing, basically saying it's okay. That's sort of like a branding or an advertisement that you don't need to worry about it. If we have individuals that are, not participating and saying, yeah, they need their colonoscopy, it's going to be like, no one's going to want to do, something that this person's, not going to be doing. But if it's accepted, in a way that reaches a large audience, people say, well, this is probably, okay. I think it's more, what we look at. Athletes are reaching this age. Musicians are reaching this age. Easy in March for all of the people that we watch to say this, it's okay, right? Because you know why? Because they're actually doing it.
Yeah.
And you're not hearing about it. And it would be nice. I mean, some people will say their medical care is personal, but I think at the end of the day, if everyone knew that everyone was on board with understanding that colorectal cancer is like one of the leading causes of cancer deaths in all age groups, in men and women, that this is the test that you need to live longer, it would be done. And I think the branding is bad because of what we look at. So we look at TV. No one's talking about it on TV. We listen to the radio. If there's a radio, or we listen to our, whatever it is that we listen to, we're not hearing it. Super Bowl commercials, there was Cologuard, which was useful, but there's no face behind the Cologuard. It's just like a random test. But you do need a good brand, right? You need something that has some kind of backing or stamp of approval sometimes in order for people to jump on the best bandwagon there really is, right? So, I think if you had folks like Michael Jordan, saying, I'm going to go get my colonoscopy. You should get your colonoscopy. Everyone's going to say, Michael Jordan, I got his sneakers. Yes, I'm going to do it. I think that's the way, it's going to help, the younger generation say it's okay. If people start talking about it, in public in general, and it's not taboo anymore, it becomes easier. Now, some people, you just tell them once and they're like, okay, I'm going to do it. I can tell you dads, if I tell them, do you want to be around for your kid? They're going to say whatever it takes. And they're going to do it. I don't think I've ever come across a dad refuse to do it. They may have had some stipulations as to who does it and where they do it, but they will do it. I think men who have significant others, they have that little bit of a nudge, so the women in men's lives or the men in women's lives, they tend to make sure that their partner stays alive and healthy, and they'll sometimes be that encouragement. And then sometimes it's not just the taboo that people are afraid of, it's the fear of the unknown. Yeah. Well, what do I have to do? What is a colonoscopy? What is the anesthesia? What are the risks? And I think sometimes when an individual has no touch point with the medical community or medical care, and they think about what a colonoscopy is, it could probably become scary, right? Being put to sleep by strangers, having someone put a foreign body, through you, not being aware, that can be intimidating, but that's where, being able to speak to your physicians and trusting the medical community comes in handy. Knowing, how many of these things we do, how many lives we actually save, makes it a little bit easier. But once again, not everyone hears this kind of conversation, right? No one really knows. I remember growing up, there used to be this Channel 13. I don't know if people watch TV or if Channel 13,
yes,
even exists, but it was PBS, or a public broadcasting station. And they used to have very useful things, that you can watch. It was very educational. They would have, sometimes, some programming on human health and disease. And it was great because they would play these things, periodically, and you can watch and learn about how the human body works. I don't think there's really anything that's like that. The amount of programming is just so voluminous. Like, people don't know what to watch. We're not all watching the same things. Like, we can't even talk about the same shows that we watch, right? Because I'm watching something different than what you're watching, and let alone if there's programming about health, who's watching that? But there's nothing that's dedicated, that has the useful information. And there's nothing that's really recommended that everyone can get behind and say, this is the prescription for human health as we know it this year. And it's worth watching, and everyone should get on board. And we'll follow this prescription. So we'll do the things that, can help us live long, healthy lives. We can talk about the foods that we should eat. We can talk about the lifestyles that we should live. We should look at the pitfalls and the traps, that are around us that make us think things are healthy and avoid them. But right now we're fragmented, and it goes to what you're saying. I think there is a lot of room for improvement, and the more your viewers listen to things like this, the more people join in, click and subscribe, the more the word gets out. And I think once like once a year during March, it's probably not enough. We're not doing this particular disease enough of what it really deserves, right? It should be Colorectal Cancer Awareness Day every day, 365 days out of the year.
No, and I think it's important too is that we live in a society where if it doesn't directly impact you, you don't care. Just being frank about it. Until you have a family member that has colon cancer, then you care. We're so disconnected with 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 what's going on with individual lives that we don't have that level of empathy and try to understand and say, you know what, I understand and I'm for the cause and whatever you want me to do, I'm here to help, you know. So I think that's a major factor. And then also when it comes to branding, I think let's say if Jordan decides, you know what, I'm coming out with a pair of Jordans to for colon cancer month and had like a I'm just off the top of the dome, like a blue heart on the sneakers. How many people will buy those sneakers
I
and
mean, a
be
lot of people
aware
about
about
this.
it?
Yeah. I think it would raise, awareness. I think it wouldn't raise as much awareness as him having a commercial saying, I'm going to go get my colon screened. You should do the same. Right. So that I think, is a better message than just creating like an item. I think hearing him say it and it becoming personal, has the greatest impact, because that commercial can always be played over and over again, and it's accessible to even people who can't afford, that particular sneaker. So I think hearing people say it is extremely important, but it depends on who's saying it, right? It depends on who the who someone looks up to, and if it doesn't have to be Jordan. It could be, it could be a singer. It can be, anyone, that's in the public eye, because not everyone has someone to look up to, in the same household. And, sometimes people will look at an actor and say, I really like Denzel. I don't have a dad, unfortunately, or I don't get along with my dad, or, I'm on my own. I'm in my 40s. Both my parents are gone. Um, I think, hearing people, talk about the things that you just wouldn't think, as part of your health screening is valuable. And we just don't have anything like that.
Right.
I don't hear a lot about, women, you should go get, a GYN exam. I don't hear enough about, you should get your a breast exam. We don't hear, these things. I don't see as many commercials about not smoking, as much and anymore. So there's things that we get exposed to, all of the time. There's a lot of media that exists that can educate us, but it's not doing, its job. We're probably just watching, kitten videos or something. That's what's getting pushed to us, right? It's not how to take care of ourselves.
No, definitely.
Well,
Tyrone, you had your
you
hand
know,
up.
it's
Go ahead,
funny.
Tyrone. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Tyrone.
it's so funny. I was just thinking about like where I've had these conversations. Like one of my favorite spots right now is Spinal Cuts, which is a barbershop on Van Sickly. And I have coffee conversation and cuts, right? And I brought a herbalist with me, and she broke it down to the gentleman better than I could. I felt so bad that it's my conversation, but it was a woman that's a herbalist that grows things for pain, and she's excited to have this conversation with the men. Like so, I find myself needing allies to generate the conversation. So my barbershop talks are excellent. My community service conversations need need a touch, but I'm a social worker, so I also, doc, um, feel like my conversations can become very intimate, just in detail, right? So now, what about a question? I'm gonna bring this up. What
Sure.
about the question on sexuality and colon cancer? Is there any correlations to how a person utilizes their colon? And it might be a difficult conversation, but I can go into all different realms.
Yeah, so there are some, increased risks, depending on, how, people perform certain acts. So, there are certain viruses. The one in particular that we tend to get more concerned about is something called HPV, or human papilloma virus. And that can be transmitted, through intimate contact. And in the rectum, which is the last part of the colon, um, right before it exits into the outside, the outside world,
Mm.
HPV can infect that area. And HPV is a virus that has many different types, but there's a couple different types that can predispose one to certain kinds of cancers. So although it's a virus and it's an infection, it is associated with the development of cancer. In women, this is one of the reasons why women get pap smears. It's really to look for the effect of this particular virus that causes cervical cancer. It is also one of the reasons why people may get head and neck cancers, or tonsillar cancers, or vocal cord cancers, or upper esophageal cancers. So that virus can infect, the back of the throat. In the rectal area, that virus can be associated with anal rectal cancer, which is a form of colon cancer that's very, very low down. And we can screen for those in particular. It's one of the reasons that's not clearly expressed, why there's commercials for HPV vaccines in younger individuals. And I think it's directed towards kids, probably in high school or even younger. And the goal is to be able to vaccinate individuals so they don't develop or catch the virus that is associated with HPV cancers, so that individuals won't be able to transmit them to someone else. So these cancers can be related to cervical cancers, penile cancers, head and neck cancers, anal rectal cancers, and vaccination, is one of the things that can help prevent or decrease that risk. So it's not so much the act itself; it's the transmission of what's there, and it's one of the cancers that we will probably see decreasing, over time as a result of vaccinations. So, I know during the pandemic, people were, concerned about, vaccines, but vaccines do have, a place, and they are tested. And there's certain ones that you can rely on, which is why, humans have been able to thrive for the last, several decades. And that's how we were able to survive, a lot of winters during flu season, and things like that. So there are some benefits to vaccine. This is one of them, and it can help reduce, a particular kind of anal rectal cancer. So it's a question that most people don't even think about, right? So, intimate contact can be risky, depending on, what your partner, has or doesn't know that they have. Another reason why people should get tested, for certain kinds of things.
Definitely. Tyrone, did you have another one, or I'm gonna go
Yes.
into the food? Go ahead, Tyrone.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Because
Tyrone.
that was so interesting, just as far as communication with a certain group, but also, as were speaking earlier, along the lines of culture, Indian food, hot food. As I'm growing things in the garden, like how should I look at that? So culturally, if I'm Jamaican, I might like jerk everything. I might like curry many things. Do those things lead to cancerous episodes?
So,
Pork.
a lot of
I
the
don't eat pork. I don't know what pork does.
Right. So, usually the white meats are better than the red meats. So, the World Health Organization, it sort of, identified high consumption of red meat as a risk factor for colorectal cancer, as well as a lot of, ultra, processed meats. So cold cuts, for instance, are not good for us. Bacon, not good for us, because of the way they're processed and preserved. So those things we should avoid, like the plague. Now, the things like jerk chicken, the spices are great, but we have to, keep in mind that there's a lot of things that we may put in food, and how we prepare the foods that make them less healthy for us. Spices in general are amazing anti-tumorigenic compounds, so that they can help fight cancer. And in the Caribbean, in India, the amount of spices that are used are actually beneficial. Now, when we start cooking things a certain way, like cooking meat well done, and we start charring the food, you start increasing the cancer potential, of that food, because you're structurally changing, the molecules in that meat, and they're becoming carcinogens. And carcinogens are chemicals that damage one's DNA. And because these are things that are going through the gastrointestinal tract, carcinogens can touch the colon cells and damage them. And then your colon cells become immortal, and they don't know when it's time to stop dividing. And these colon cells can keep growing and growing and growing. They can start to burrow into a blood cell and take off and go somewhere else in the body and start growing there. And that's a metastasis, or that's a tumor. So how you cook food is extremely important. We typically would discourage charring your food and eating the black escar, from, grilled meats. So that's one thing. The other is frying foods and cooking with certain kinds of oils. And I know that in the Caribbean, my parents are from, South America, they're Guyanese. We cook curry, all the time, and the curry is great. But the oils that we sometimes use are probably not the best oils, right? If you look at the oil and it's like brominated, it's like modified by a factory or a company so that you can buy it to make something that tastes good, not good for you. Off the back, as much as I love the food, not good for you. Frying foods in oil, probably not good for you, because as those oils heat up, they start to change, and you lose a lot of the benefits of these oils. Some of the top oils, that we should be cooking with or eating, tend to be only a couple. Things like coconut oil, Caribbean, we have tons of coconut. Coconut oil is great. Avocado oil is great. Olive oil, coconut oil, coconut, avocado oil, all three of the best oils. Ghee, I don't know if you're familiar with ghee, but ghee is like, a butter. So it does come from cows, but it's the rich portion, of that milk. That's great, for us to use. Other oils, like a lot of the vegetable oils, a lot of the ultra processed oils that you see in the grocery store, probably not as beneficial, to us, when we cook with them. So fried foods, I recommend, against. Jerk chicken, nothing wrong with jerk chicken. The spices are great. You just have to watch, what you're adding to it. I'm not a cook myself. So, I'm sure that you can find the best recipes, but there's ways to make, our traditional foods, healthy. So, I wouldn't say never have jerk chicken. I'm just saying, just make sure that you're using the right ingredients as you go through. And spices, 100% good for you. There's no spice that I'm aware of that's bad for you. It's only how we cook it.
Mm. But also, could you break down that term? Because I picked it up when you were talking earlier, when you used the term, was it tumorigenic? Can you explain that to the audience?
So tumorigenic.
Yeah.
So,
Tumorigenic,
there's,
yes.
cancers. Yeah. So we call things tumors when, they're growing without stopping. So normally our cells will grow, and then they'll stop, and then new ones will replace the ones that have stopped growing. They just kind of kick them out. And that's what keeps us, who we are, because we have controlled, cell division. Now, when you have cells that keep growing, you may see like an outgrowth, of something. You see a collection of cells, and you may see a bump. And that's the beginning of, what could be, a tumor, depending on why it's growing like that. Not everything that grows is a tumor, so I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. But, an example of a growth would be like a callus that you can get on your hand. If you keep rubbing, or if you keep lifting weights or using your hands, you get these little growths. And these little growths are meant to be protective. So they will only get so big, right? And then they kind of stop, because your body's mechanism knows when it's time to stop. In the colon, when we talk about a tumor, there's a similar phenomenon that's happening. Something is causing these cells to keep growing, but they will never stop. They'll keep growing. Normally, cells you can't see with your eye, but as they divide and they increase in number, and they go from 2 cells to 4 to hundreds to thousands to millions, you start to see them under your eye, and they get to be, to the point where they can be like this big, or even that big, inside of the colon. And there's not much time, that one would have before those cells start growing downwards into the wall of the colon itself and finding their way into the bloodstream. So when we reach the process where something is growing for no reason, we call that a tumor. Like when it starts to, increase in number to the point where it's visible, that's the beginning of a tumor. Having something that's a response, a protective response, a normal response, is not really a tumor. That's just a normal reaction. A tumor is something that's bad. It's a bad growth. And it usually will become cancer at some point if it's left unchecked and not removed. And this applies for the colon. It applies for the uterus. It applies to the stomach. It applies to the kidney. Anything that grows aberrantly, meaning that it's not a normal pattern or protective.
And that's why I wanted to pose that to you, because I think that's important to the listeners who's going to be listening to it, that they have to understand. That's why it's important to get screening, because you want to before it's too late at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And that's the most important thing. But let's get into food, because I think this is the main appetizer of this conversation. When you talk about fruits and vegetables, what would you say would be your top 10 fruits or vegetables that people should apply to their diet when it comes to colon cancer prevention?
The top 10 foods. So anything that comes from the ground is probably, one of the best, sources for prevention of, cancers in general. So, I'm going to give you the framework, of how I see things, because, I think it's more than 10, that would be on that list. But if we think about colors, right? So things that come from the ground that are brightly colored tend to have the most amounts of useful chemicals that are natural, but can help heal cells and prevent cancers. So, for instance, when I think of brightly colored vegetables, I think of things like red peppers, kale, spinach, dark green, red, purple cabbage, red onions. Anything that has bright colors are extremely useful. And we have to think back as to, why is that? And, for some reason, when this planet was being formed, there were no humans, right? You had to have plant life, on Earth in order for us to have this atmosphere, right? Because, plants take in carbon dioxide, they release oxygen, and that's how we got this environment. So plants were here first. And when plants were here, there was really no big atmosphere. That meant that there was a lot of radiation, that was coming and hitting the surface of the planet. And the things that were able to survive had bright colors. And if you look at the structure of the chemical that makes these bright colors, they're able to absorb the radiation from the sun, this ionizing radiation of the sun, and protect the plant, so the plant could thrive. So these plants have existed for millions and millions of years, and we actually get the benefit of those chemicals by eating them. So we call them phytochemicals. meaning that they're plant chemicals. Two of my favorite, are curcumin, which is a plant chemical that's found in turmeric. And I like that because my mom's Indian and she cooks, a lot of curry. So, the yellow pigment that's found in curry is curcumin, and it's this very, very useful chemical because it's been shown in many studies to have anti-carcinogenic or anti-tumorigenic properties. So the more you consume, the more you're able to have this chemical go through your gastrointestinal tract and help repair some of the damage that's done, through just, what typically will enter into your system. So if you have a couple cells that are slightly injured, the DNA may need some repair. Curcumin is able to help that process. A second chemical that I like is found in grapes, and that's called resveratrol. And resveratrol is what gives grapes their purple color. And once again, it's one of these chemicals that were able to protect, the fruit from the ionizing radiation of the sun. And we can get the same sort of effect by consuming this particular substance. I do like broccoli because it's a green color, but also has a similar, color that has a compound that has anti-tumorigenic activity, meaning that it can help repair damaged cells and prevent a cancer from forming. And there's countless numbers of these chemicals that appear in foods. So we think of oranges, we think of blueberries. They all have these colors that have these pigments. So it's really the pigmented foods that are great for us. So if you had to say, what are the top foods, I just think about all of the fruits and vegetables that have bright colors. I think broccoli, spinach, kale, turmeric spices, grapes, red onions, you name it. Those are the vegetables and the spices that I lean towards. And I lean towards the whole foods more so than the supplements themselves. And the reason is that although I just mentioned these one particular compounds, there's many different forms of these chemicals that are present in whole foods. So it's really important that you get all of the combinations of these useful plant compounds as nature intended. So it's better to eat the whole foods. It's better to eat them, for instance, in a salad, rather than trying to juice them, for instance, because, nature kind of knew how to evolve with these plants so you wouldn't overeat them, right? So, for instance, there are some dangers to, trying to concentrate all of these things down and try to win the game.
Right.
And I'll use the example of apple juice, right? So apples are great, nice red color. It has some benefits to it. It has fiber. It's great for you. How could you go wrong, right? So why not just juice them? So one could take apples, and how many apples, does it take to make a glass, of apple juice? I have no idea. Probably like 6 or 7, or if not more. However, if you were to go through the through the garden and pick out an apple, you could probably eat maybe 1 or 2.
Right.
And your body knows it's time to call it quits. Now, when you juice an apple, you're processing it. So you're taking it one step away from how nature intended. And now you're getting the useful chemicals, but now you're getting more sugar, inside of the diet. And now because you've juiced it, you've taken out a lot of the fiber that helps reduce, some of the sugar from being absorbed. And now you just have sugar water, and maybe some useful chemicals, but no fiber. And the fiber is extremely important because it helps to nourish the bacteria inside of your gastrointestinal tract that provide a number of other different functions as well. So you actually do more harm, by processing foods rather than eating them whole. And I think, when you see the juice shops, it's great because you think you're getting a quick fix, but it's substituting from, the way we would have done things when we were, running away from the saber-toothed tiger and we were cavemen. We tried to get a little smart on nature, but nature still, very good, at knowing what we need. We can take it a step further. We can say, well, we can make apple juice, but we can only drink it, within a day, if we don't refrigerate it. So why don't we put some preservatives in it, right? Why don't we, put a little color in it so that it doesn't, turn brown or dark on us? And then these factories will do that, right? They'll filter it out even more. They'll add some, chemicals to it, so it looks good. So it all looks the same. So there's no batch to batch differences. So when you look at it, in the fridge section, it looks okay. And we take the same exact thing, but we've removed ourselves once again from nature, and we've put in probably some things that are harmful, to us. So we'll see apple juice in the store and think it's okay. I remember having something like orange juice, like Tropicana, thinking that was orange juice. It's not really. And it looks very different than if I squeeze oranges myself. But eating the whole orange is better than me squeezing the oranges and drinking that much sugar. Better than drinking whatever it is that, Tropicana is, because I don't consider that, real juice. So we have to remember, having whole foods is probably, what's been intended. Now, I mentioned the fruits and the vegetables, and I do have to, say that, eating protein is useful as well. So it's not, all bad. You think about the big groups of foods, and I hope Brother Tyrone is okay. But I hope that, people are okay eating fish, poultry, and even some kinds of meat. So like white meat is probably better than red meat. There are certain kinds of fish that are better than others. So fish that are rich in what we call omega-3 fatty acids are good for us. So things like salmon, for instance, is good for us. Sardines, are good for us if we can, catch them in the wild. They do have beneficial fatty acids that are good for our overall health. Those things are good for us to eat in moderation. We do have to avoid, I think I mentioned this earlier, a lot of the ultra processed meats. Cold cuts are horrible. Don't eat them. I wouldn't put them on the list. Red meat, you do want to minimize as much as humanly possible, but it goes for all of those groups of animal proteins. How you cook them is also vitally important. The kinds of oils that you may cook with them, extremely important. You don't want to fry your fish if you can grill it, or if you can broil it, or bake it. You want to make sure that you're not having any of the cold cuts. You want to watch how you preserve foods, as well.
Definitely. And then also talk about beans, because I know that offers vitamin B and E, like lentils, black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans.
Yeah,
You
quinoa.
want to
Yeah.
dive into that?
Yeah. So these are also, plants, right? So they come from the ground, and they also have, a variety of useful vitamins and minerals. And vitamins and minerals are useful for our cells to function. The beans are great because they have B vitamins. B vitamins are great for, neurologic health. In particular, beans contain, a lot of the fat soluble vitamins. So like vitamin E, for instance, is a powerful antioxidant. And the reason why antioxidants are good for us is that in order to destroy cells, you do need oxygen, strangely enough. So there's something known in science as oxidative damage, meaning if there's too much oxygen, you can get rid of something, you can destroy something. And if something is destroyed in piecemeal and it's allowed to sort of, persist, it may divide into something else that has the same mistakes. And then you have like a Frankenstein cell, and that divides, and it's more of these mutant cells that keep going. Now, if you have antioxidants present, in your system and circulating in these cells, instead of oxidative damage to your DNA, you can just try to destroy the vitamin E instead. It sort of takes the collateral damage, it takes the hit, so your DNA doesn't do that. And that's why, consuming a lot of these fruits and vegetables, are very useful, because they're protecting, your cells. They're like the Secret Service, to your DNA. They're going to jump in front of the bullet, and take that hit. So, a lot of the fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, K, extremely important, in your diet. But it's probably better to get them from foods, like eating the beans, for instance, rather than having to go to a supplement, right? So I would still recommend, that you eat your vitamins and minerals sourced from whole foods, because if you're getting it off the shelf, once again, you've removed yourself a step from nature, and now you're getting something that is probably too much, of what you need, and a lot of other fillers and substances, like sugars, for instance, they make them into gummies, that you probably, don't need, that probably start to extract from, what you really need. In beans, for instance, as well as other fruits and vegetables, there's other compounds, other chemicals that are useful. And the way, you get your body to absorb a lot of these nutrients are in specific ratios that somehow nature intended. And it's easier to absorb vitamins and nutrients when they come from whole foods rather than us giving you a single, agent. Better for you to have, your vitamin B's and your vitamin E's from beans than taking a vitamin E supplement, right? Because you're going to get a high dose, probably too much for what you need. Whereas if you were just eating a balanced diet, you would be fine. Now, with that said, I know that it is difficult to get a balanced diet in certain communities and depending on where you live. And we didn't really talk about, these food deserts, that are even here in New York City. But it's something that's, worth us talking about. But, yes, anything that goes from the ground is probably going to be good for you in moderation. There are some starchy foods, that you can probably, minimize, I would say. And I would just put, potatoes, on that list. Potatoes, are good in moderation, but there's a lot of starch that's there. Sweet potatoes, yams, they're also good for you, but you have to, eat them in moderation. Just because, a lot of starch, may not be, the best thing for you.
No, definitely, definitely. Go ahead, Tyrone. You're muted. Unmute yourself. Go ahead.
I have, pardon me for my phone that died, but I have some soursop that's being donated by Pepsi up in Purchase, New York. We're gonna have some seedlings to give out to folks this summer.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man.
So soursop is great. A lot of the fruits, especially in the Caribbean, are really good for you. Most of the fruits do contain high amounts of vitamin C, and vitamin C is one of the most potent antioxidants out there. It's one of the reasons why we recommend it around flu season or the winter, because it can also boost your immune system. But diets that are rich, in vitamin C and antioxidants, can help prevent, a lot of cancers.
Definitely, definitely. Go ahead, Tyrone. You wanted to add
I
something?
was gonna say, because one of the things I've noticed up here, there are many Caribbeans that I've met that love traditional items, and they bring it back. They'll go to the Caribbean and bring it back. So I understand the soursop grows in the Caribbean. However, the seedlings that I give out this summer will be for folks to keep in their home. So I would expect some experienced gardeners to want to participate in growth of soursop.
Yeah, I remember growing up on soursop and soursop ice cream. But with that said, right, soursop is great, but when we start getting creative with it, we have to watch out, right? So when we start putting these things in pies and cakes and making ice cream, we sometimes can just detract from the nutritional value of what we really want. So nothing beats the pure fruit itself. So we just have to, just make sure that, if we have, apples, for instance, it's better to eat the apple than the apple pie.
Definitely. And I definitely understand where you're coming from, because again, when you go from the apple to the apple pie to the apple juice, it dilutes its true purpose.
Correct.
And
Right.
so,
Food is medicine. Food is
right.
medicine. Right. And the more you modify it, the less effective it becomes.
And I think that's important what Brother Tyrone is doing with the garden. Before we go into the garden, Talk about nuts. I think those, again, it's a healthy fatty acid fiber. Um, um, Almonds, cashews, hazelnuts, pecans, pistachios, macadamia nuts. Can you talk about the benefit of the different kind of nuts?
Yeah, so there's different kinds. So you mentioned peanuts, right? So peanuts is
Yeah,
different kinds.
right.
Some of them are good for you. Some of them are bad for you. I think in terms of the benefit of nuts, they do have those healthy fats, right? So those healthy fats can act like antioxidants as well, and they also have fat soluble vitamins, and I mentioned them before, like vitamin E, for instance. The tree nuts, a lot of them that you had mentioned. So the things like like walnuts, macadamia, I think you had mentioned,
Yes.
pistachios. Those are all healthy. At the end of the day, though, we have to remember that we should be eating in moderation. So it is easy, to eat a lot of nuts, but we do have to remember that there is a fat content associated with them, and there's a certain amount of calories that come with the nuts. So once again, eating the nuts, if you pulling them off a tree, is great. But when you start eating these nuts, that are in these bags, that are salted, that are spiced, that are flavored, that are honey roasted, you start to lose that value. So the nuts are great, but once again, it's how you eat these nuts. You are going to extract a ton of vitamins and minerals, a lot of healthy fats and fat soluble vitamins. They're very good for you. They're anti-tumorigenic. There is a study that's going on at Cornell where we're looking at how walnuts can decrease the risk for colorectal cancer,
Mm.
as well, because we do realize the value, in nuts, in the diet. But we do have to sort of like weigh, well, when we're eating, how much are we really eating? In the United States, there's access to so much food that it's easy for us to even eat too much, of a good thing. Like we can eat tons of fish, we can eat tons of meat, we can eat tons of chicken breast, right, which is good for you. But at the end of the day, we have to watch our caloric intake. That comes with a balanced diet. So it's annoying to hear people say have a balanced diet, to diet and exercise, but it really is true, right? So you don't eat just because the plate is full. You can fill your plate up, but once you're full, you don't have to keep eating, right? So if you're eating a lot of fiber will fill you up, within a short amount of time, and that's okay. So you're not getting a ton of extra sugar, or calories that you don't need. That's going to be converted into fat. Excess fat that you carry on you is typically not a healthy fat. It's usually a fat that is inflammatory, especially the fat that you would carry around your midsection. And that inflammatory fat can also alter how your hormones work. Certain kinds of hormones can, stimulate cancers to grow. And that's why, maintaining a good weight is extremely important. And we didn't talk about exercise, but, exercise is one of those things that becomes even more important, for us as we grow older. So, a lot of resistance training, a lot of aerobic activity, as much as we can do it, is useful because you help rebalance the hormones. So as testosterone decreases, as estrogen decreases, it becomes more difficult for us to hold on to muscle mass. We start to put on more weight. Exercise, helps us. Having a balanced diet where our caloric intake, is at the level that we really need it. Exercise to make sure that our muscles are working so that our hormones are regulated. Extremely important as this checkpoint to make sure that our cells are dividing and pausing to make sure that it can go through its next stage of development is extremely important. So diet, exercise, once again, it's those two things, that are the prescription for health and long life.
What about
And
sleep?
go ahead. He's asleep. What about?
I was thinking, hey doc, I went from my waist size. I went from a size 42 to a size 34. I probably could have comfortably had a size 44. Um, so the thing that I'm looking at, like in my older age, and I guess as I'm speaking to older gentlemen, are there more likeliness to have cancer with a heavier waist, or because I'm thinking about even folks like Shaq. Those guys are huge, but they still were small at one point.
Yeah, so there is an association between having an increased waistline and certain kinds of diseases. So not just colorectal cancer, cancers in general, as well as cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease. Your risk for heart attacks go up. Your risk for stroke, goes up as well. A lot of it is thought to be, secondary to how those hormones are regulated. So the more you can approach your ideal body weight, the better it is for you overall, not just from a cancer perspective, but just a general overall health perspective. So coming down on your waist size is extremely important, and that's probably even a better measure than your weight. Most people want to stand on a scale and look at the pounds, but I think where you're putting the fat on is really what you need to target. Because if you're the same the same weight, I'm not going to ask how much weight. Let's say you weigh 200 pounds. You at 200 pounds and a waist size of 44 is very different than you at 200 pounds and a waist size of like 36, right? Because at a waist size of 36 and you being 200 pounds, you may have more muscle mass. That is a healthier weight than you just being 200 and a big, and a big.
I was 260, 261, 265.9.
Right. So the key is, how do you get that waist size down? Right. I'm not going to say it's the absolute 260.
Yeah.
That may come down with time, but I think we shouldn't get focused on what the scale says. It's what your body composition is really showing you. You should be a lean, mean fighting machine. And you don't need to be on the scale for that. You can probably tell if you can reach over and tie your shoes, right? If you can walk, without getting short of breath, if you can walk upstairs, right? If you can bale hay, right? If you can do these things, be able to engage in physical activity, that's great, right? It's not what's on the scale. I see, and I hear a lot of people get focused on, what's on the scale. I got to lose more weight. Sometimes it's, well, don't try to lose muscle mass to lose, weight so that the number looks good. It's live a healthy lifestyle, do things that can, put some stress, on your muscles, whether it's your upper body, whether it's your, your legs, your lower half, walk more, take the stairs, try not to, take the bus 2 stops, if you can avoid it, walk a little bit more, park a little bit further. Not a fan of supplements, in general, as much as you're going to see, the influencers, wherever they are, toot about, things that you can take. Nothing is ever going to beat you having a balanced diet that's rich in fruits and vegetables, right? So once again, creatine, removed, from nature, right? You can get the same compounds that are found in fruits and vegetables without making a factory or a company suck up your money. So, supplements have a very small group of individuals where it's beneficial in. I would say creatine would be good for you if you were training for the Olympics. If you were training for something that is intense and you needed to have intense training for, 8 months out of the year, I would say there's probably no human way that you're going to be able to eat that much, that you're going to need these supplements. For the person that's the most normal that's existing, around us, diet and exercise is still the best thing. I don't think you need extra supplements, for that. I wouldn't even, I don't think you even need extra supplements of resveratrol or curcumin if you can just eat the plant, right? If you can just get that, in your diet, ginger root, you can get the whole ginger, and you can add that to your food. Don't get sucked into the advertising, for supplements, for vitamins, eat the foods. That is the best thing.
So what about just getting my butt washed out? They had a place on 125th Street. I know it sounded ignorant the way I said that, But
Go
they
ahead,
used to
Tom.
take this
No,
blood
you're referring, so
thing.
what they call it like a colon cleanse, or
Yeah,
a colonic is what they call it. And
on it.
what they do is, they'll put a small little device, like a mini hose, into the rectum, into the colon, and they'll irrigate you with water. And then they'll try to see if they can, wash or remove stool. That's not the best way to cleanse the colon, because your body is very good, at doing that for you, right? So there's signals that make everything contract, from your esophagus down through your stomach, through your small intestine, through your colon, and out to the world. And it's something that works rhythmically. And fruits and vegetables are always going to be the best source of a colon cleanse, if that's what you're considering, because they don't dissolve, right? So when you eat fiber, there's different kinds. There's something called soluble fiber. Think of like the inside of an apple. And then that's the soluble side, the inside of the apple. And then there's the insoluble side, which is the skin. So the skin won't dissolve, but it will act like nature's Brillo. And as it's going through the gastrointestinal tract, it's going to scrape and rub across the walls. And that's what's really helping you. When you have a salad, that's what the salad is doing. It's removing a lot of the toxins, from the wall of the colon, and it's allowing contact time with some of those useful chemicals to the wall of the colon. So those cells can take up these powerful antioxidants and these anti-tumorigenic, molecules, and help your colon cells heal and stay healthy. If you're doing a colonic, it's doing nothing for you. You might as well just, have a normal bowel movement. A little bit of water is not doing anything, that a salad, could do better. So eating the fiber from whole fruits and vegetables is still going to be better than any colonic. Now, some individuals may have slow motility where they're chronically constipated, and they may just go every couple days or so. A colonic is still probably not, what they need, right? From my perspective, the colonics, are just a way to make people feel better. In terms of the health benefit, there's no health benefit, at all to an isolated colonic at all. There are healthy ways that individuals can have more regular bowel movements, sourced through either fruits or vegetables. There are medications for individuals that have true physical problems, with the way their gut works. So genetically, or, sometimes through inheritance, people may have gastrointestinal tracts that move slowly. And these individuals may sometimes benefit from, certain kinds of medications that can target the problem, that these individuals have with how the gut may regulate fluids and electrolytes, or how the gut contracts to push things through the system. But that's something that's probably worth speaking with your doctors about, rather than identifying that you have a problem and now you're going to do something that you think is the right thing, where you could be missing the boat. So God forbid you're having trouble going to the bathroom because there's something that's growing inside of the colon and you're having difficulty passing stool around this thing. And now you're just taking this fluid, through the rectum, thinking that you're doing yourself a service when you're really not, because a healthcare professional didn't say, there's something wrong, that's there. So, I think if, you identify that you need assistance with some way that your guts, working, probably want to see like your physician. And that's what we're technically supposed to be here for. If there's something that's different, talk to one of us about it, so we can take, our breadth of experience, and seeing everything, from, the most, easy to identify, this person's in the hospital, this is what it looks like when it's really bad, to, this person had complained about this, and this is, how it progressed, and having that experience, is more useful to you than, just trying to go it on your own. We've seen, because of our training, thousands and thousands of patients, and we know what things look like, when they're brewing, and we can point these things out. We could even tell you, well, what you're describing, your need for going, to have a colonic is probably because there could be an endocrine issue. There could be a problem with your thyroid, for instance. We should look at that rather than just say, yeah, just treat it this way, whatever you want, it's okay. I don't think that would be the right way to do it. Now, if it's something that made you feel comfortable, and we identified that it's not a constipation issue or a mechanical issue, that's probably you can do whatever, probably do whatever you want. But in terms of the benefit, we wouldn't say, there's a problem, just go do that and just fix the problem. Don't put a Band-Aid on something like that.
My doctor at the VA, she definitely strongly told me not to do it because of the nutrients that I lose. So I did it one time just because someone convinced me that it was a good process. But then after I was told by my doctor, it was a no-go. I learned a word from you that made me laugh, and I don't know if it's a root word from when we was younger. But do you remember we used to call people slow-mo? Do you remember
What was that?
people slow-mo? We would call people slow-mo, meaning like if they couldn't run fast. And then you
Oh, like
said,
slow motion.
oh, slow motion. I thought it was slow mobility. And I was like, okay. I was like, I was trying to put
Yeah,
it together. I was like,
slow
maybe,
motion. Like,
okay. So slow motion.
yeah.
Yeah. So slow motion is the action of the colon if you plug it up and you eat too many fatty fast foods. And that's a nice maybe simple
It can
way.
go either way. It can go either way.
Oh,
Sometimes when people eat a lot of fatty foods, if you can absorb enough of that fat into your bloodstream, the fat will just whip right through you and it will act like a laxative. So some people will eat a lot of, starchy foods, and those starches may absorb water, and then it becomes like a brick, in their system, and that can slow things down. So that's like one of the bad side effects of like fast food. Some other fast foods are just so greasy. So like if you went to Five Guys and you had like their fries, for instance, the really oily fries, you may just have to run to the bathroom before you're even done, right? It's because the fat's malabsorbed. You can't get it all into your bloodstream. It's just too much. It's just too much fat. But a slow motility or a slow motion, colon, sometimes if it's, once in a while, it's probably related to something that you ate. But if it's persistent and it's different than what, you've been used to, for years and years and years, it's worth, seeing a physician and saying, there's a change in my bowel habits. And that's what it really is. And then you get it evaluated, whether it's blood tests or imaging, and things like that. Leave it up to, us to point you in the right direction.
Definitely. I think, and that's the one thing about having you on, Dr. Crawford, is pushing people into the right direction when it comes to being educated, informed, of making the right decision about your health. Because the most important thing is about self-care. Whether you brand it or not, that's the most important thing. But Brother Tyrone, I'm going to pose this to you. From all this information that Dr. Crawford had brought to the platform today, how are you going to apply that to the garden, and just talk about the garden, and talk about the real DAS colorectal uh, outreach cancer outreach program?
okay. So last year, we made some beautiful relationships with a couple of barbershops, with the Prince Joshua Community Center, with the YMCA on Nostrand Avenue, with many churches. And I think what I've learned through the years is to be a fly on the wall in the community. So I'm gonna continue to go to the YMCA this summer. I'm gonna pull up at Gersh Park way more often just to talk to the people that are exercising and working in the park. Meaning like they're playing basketball, they're running, they're doing aerobics. So I hope to have tabling more just to have the conversation. Um, that's still me spreading the information about awareness and screenings. My beautiful goal is during the canvas. conversation and cancer sessions that we have in the summer. I think that I'll gather professionals, I'll gather family members and people who do have cancer, because I'm going to reach out to the hospitals to send them to the garden to have um, a different type of socialization. Growing your vegetables and seeing the vegetables grow and speaking to the herbalists and the other gardeners will add to the quality of life, because we were just talking earlier, it's about quality of life issues. By opening up the garden, I hope that folks being informed that they have cancer, folks that are anxious about it, will come and sit and chill and paint and talk and listen to music. So the opportunities will be vast for relaxation therapy and guided imagery. So I think that those will be the a perfect mix in East New York for folks that are dealing with it or opening up conversations. So hopefully also I have some great paintings to show at the end. Those are
That's
going to be
all.
my outreach endeavors this summer.
And can you just give the address to the garden? Because
Oh,
I know
the
it's gonna
garden.
be opened up very soon. I know
Yeah.
you were on TikTok cleaning up the garden a little bit on TikTok. So give us the address so people know where to go to just be a part.
Mhm. So the garden in East New York, we have two. We have one on the corner of Barbie and Glenmore. It's on Garden Mile. So there's a mile of all of gardens in East New York that Green Thumb has been cultivating and finding different farmers. So it's going to be along the Green Mile in East New York on Jerome and Glenmore, and also on Glenmore and Barbie. They're right around the corner from each other. So I can't wait to see the community come out and actually show East New York some love. Can you paint
Definitely,
that?
definitely,
Yep, do my
definitely.
best.
That's awesome because again, from this conversation we're having today, those fresh and fruits and vegetables are going to be at that garden because I saw brother Tyrone taking notes. So that's the
Yes.
beauty about the podcast is that I had Dr. Crawford on last year. He was talking about how we can get the community involved. We go into the new year. We have brother Tyrone. The Real Dads Network actually basically putting the boots on the ground and making it happen. Again, I thank you guys for coming on. Before we end the show, how can people find you?
Oh,
Who wants to
me?
go first? Either or. Who wants to go first? How can people find you?
I never even
Oh, it's usually
considered
it's
that.
usually easy to find me. Yeah, I'm over in Manhattan, so if you just look for me online, you can just type my name, Carl Crawford. Usually MD helps because I'll go, to the top as opposed to the baseball player who has my same name, and you can type in Cornell, and if you type in Carl Crawford MD Cornell, you'll see how to reach me at the office.
There we go. And then, brother Tyrone, how can people find you on social media, or how can people kind of reach out to you if they want to support what the network is doing?
Well, you can easily go to the Real Dads Network and find our endeavors. RealDadsNetwork.org. With me, there's not that many Tyrone Neros. I'm actually the Tyrone Nero. It's not that Tyrone is a rare name, and Nero to be a black Nero is very rare. So it's easy to find me, and all of my topics are based on gardening and family, and like I'm very lucky to be to have children in each generation, 30s, 20s, and a 2 year old. So my father experience is based on love and giving back, because as a black American and a black veteran, I feel like all I'm supposed to do is give back at the end of my life. So I'm very thankful to the Real Dads Network. This is amazing to be in this space. I'm listening to my daughter play, so I can't wait to put her to sleep, because 2 years old, she need to be knocked out right now.
And I thank you for your service, but I thank you for your sacrifice of being on here while You have your 2-year-old daughter. Like, where you at, Dad? I ain't
Yeah.
sleepy yet.
I gave
Playtime
her a
still.
bath right before the meeting.
She's like, I don't care about that path. They're like, I want playtime with Dad. So I appreciate you taking the time to be on here. Again, this has been an amazing conversation here on the podcast. Again, it is uh colon colon cancer awareness month. As a citizen, we have to do our part to spread the word, let people know, be informed, educated, so they can make the best decision of for their health. Because again, it's about self care. If we can find a way to brand it where it's cool to get your colon check, then this is what we have to do. So we got, it's not just for March, it's year round. So again, I thank Dr. Crawford, I thank Brother Tyrone. Again, like, subscribe, and we're out. Peace. All right, stay
My
on for
pleasure.
1 second. Stay on 1 second. Let me end the recording.